Last week, my band Broke Royals released a new single called Still, and I'm super proud of the song, but I'm also really proud of the mix, and I wanted to take you inside this mixing session to walk through some of the things that I think had the biggest impact on it. Now, some of these things are fundamental things that everybody should be doing in every mix, at least conceptually, and some of them are kind of specific and a little bit advanced. So if you're struggling to get a mix that you're proud of in general, I would say ignore some of the more advanced things, focus on the fundamental things. I'll spell them out for you in this video, but also be sure to pick up my 6-step checklist to a pro mix for free from link in the description below. It's really going to help you out. It just goes through the 6 steps that all professional mixes have and how to do them specifically inside Logic. That said, if you're already getting mixes that you're pretty proud of and you want to learn a few tricks that might help you get them to the next level, this video is definitely for you as well. Okay, let's go and jump into this mix. The first thing I want to look at is some very simple EQ moves on my drums that are taking them from kind of flat and demo-y sounding to a full finished drum mix. Now I'm doing this on the track stack level or the drum bus level. This is where all of my drum tracks, individual tracks, are running together in one place. So by doing just a little bit of EQ here, it kind of massively impacts the overall sound of the drum. So all of my tracks here are running into this track stack, and then I'm doing a little bit of EQ here. Now I'm doing 2 EQs, or I have 2 different EQs that each have a few moves. I'm going to walk through the specific moves in just a second. And while I am using third-party plugins here, you could do this with just the channel EQ and the vintage tube EQ inside Logic. So you could use stock plugins for this. I just have these, so I use them. But let's listen to this in solo first, and I want you to hear with this bypassed and then engaged how much they clean up the drums. They take them from being kind of flat to sounding really polished. Take those moves away, add them back in. And in the context of the mix, take them away again, kind of flat. Okay, let's take a second and just break down what each of these individual moves are. So the first one on this channel style EQ is this big cut around 100 Hertz. This is a really tubby frequency on kick drums. And one thing about drum mics is that your close mic is going to get that, but so are your room mics and your overhead. So by addressing it a little bit all together, it's going to clean up all of those in one place. I don't like to do a lot of corrective EQ here, more kind of sweetening EQ, which we'll talk about in just a second. But a little bit of this on something that is kind of always a problem, and a problem that I'm going to hear in all the microphones I like to address. So this frequency here is that kind of boom, boom, boom. So cleaning that, we got to clean that up. And just by cleaning up that one area, it tightens up the sound of the kick drum a ton. Again, if I just bypass this one EQ move, it almost like shifts the sound of the low end of that kick drum down. It makes it feel like a deeper kick drum and kind of gets the level feeling a little bit better of the kick drum relative in the mix. Now, just to be clear, this is totally mix dependent. In this song, we're not going for a really punchy big kick drum. So I'm cutting maybe more than I might in some other mixes. And it's also a little bit stylistic and preferential. But just be aware of this kind of 100-ish Hertz frequency on kick drums. Okay, the second is addressing this issue on the snare drum. So if we listen to this here, if I solo this frequency range, there's this kind of whoop, whoop. So similar kind of thing to what we were addressing with the kick drum, but now with the snare. It has to do more with the harmonics of the snare as opposed to the actual fundamental of the snare. The fundamental is where you get the body of the snare drum. This is a harmonic of it, and it just sounds a little weird to me. And again, it's not just being picked up in the direct snare mic, but it's also getting into overheads and the room mic. So by addressing it here a little bit, we're cleaning it up across all those sources a little bit. I'm sure I'm doing some EQ on individual tracks addressing this as well, or I likely am. And sometimes you can get away with just doing a little bit on the drum bus and that will fix the whole thing. So these are corrective. I don't like doing a lot of corrective on the drum bus, but a little bit, if it's going to be a problem across all the mics, makes sense. Now the second area that I'm getting into here has to do with kind of sweetening the sound of the drums a little bit more. So here I'm doing a pretty small boost around 1,000-ish Hertz, and this is a really sweet area on a drum EQ in my opinion. It's kind of this almost trashy range. but it feels very natural. So I almost always do a little bit of a boost here on drums, especially live recorded drums, but sometimes programmed drums like Logic Drummer or something as well. Okay, and then the last one on this EQ is just a little bit of a lift in the high end here. This is just adding kind of some air to the cymbals, into the snare. So just a little bit of a lift up here. Again, take this EQ away. Not bad, but add it in. It just cleans up that sound quite a bit. Okay, let's jump down now to this UAD EQ. This is a Pultec style EQ, and this is really just doing two things. Low end, and we can boost or attenuate at the low end, so that's kind of like boosting or cutting at the low end, and I'll pull this EQ back up just so I can kind of demonstrate here. And I can set the frequency. So basically, I'm adding about 3 decibels right around 30 hertz, so super low end boost down here. And then I'm adding about 3 decibels at about 10K. So again, really high frequency boost here. So basically I'm doing a smiley face EQ, and I like to do these types of broad stroke EQ moves on tube EQs, not in all mixes, but this is a good place if you're starting to dabble with using kind of analog style EQs. This is a good kind of EQ for this type of thing. And this is just sweetening the sound of the drum mix and making it feel a little higher fidelity is the way I like to think about it. So with these moves on, and if I hit this little red button here to turn them off, just a little duller, a little less full. It's just kind of like this finished hi-fi button almost on your drum mix. So a little move like this, 3 decibels and around 30 hertz, 3 decibels around 10K is going to sweeten up your overall drum mix quite a bit. Okay, the second thing I want to show you is the bass guitar and how I got it to sit just right in the low end, be super consistent and full, and cut through in the right way in the upper mid range. Check this out. Okay, so the secret, if you will, here is that I'm taking one bass recording, so it's just a DI bass recording, the guitar or bass guitar running direct in, and I have duplicated it, so now I have 2 tracks, and I'm splitting them and processing them differently based on the frequency range. So if we open up the mixer view here, you'll see I have a sub channel, and here I've split off everything except anything really basically about 250-ish and below. And then I'm doing a little bit of corrective EQ, if you will, to highlight the sub a little bit more than kind of this low bassy frequency. So this is basically just splitting all the sub information off. And then the second EQ on this second track, so this is the other track now, is isolating all the top frequencies, the mid-range and upper mid-range. And then I'm processing these differently. So for the sub frequencies, I wanted them to just stay super consistent and glued so that it's not spiking up where there's too much low end and then dying away by the end of the note. I wanted it to just stay super consistent. Now, you can do this with a compressor, but the easiest way and the way I've been dabbling with that I'm really excited about is by doing it much more aggressively with a limiter. And in particular, I think this L1 by Waves is the best tool for this just because of the configuration of the plugin. But basically, I can just set a threshold that anytime the bass passes this threshold, it's just going to get turned down. It's going to be basically limiter, right, to this specific point, right? So I set this super low, negative 22 decibels, almost 23 decibels, and then you just set an output ceiling, so you're bringing up the output to whatever level it was before, whatever level you want it to be inside the mix. So here, you can see it's limiting a ton. You'll see over on my meter, barely moves. But the bass still feels fairly dynamic, and that's because the part that you really perceive, at least notice, is the upper mid-range and the mid-range part. So this part that we're filtering out up here, and I'm processing this a little differently so that it cuts through and actually cuts through a little bit more aggressively, but then dies back away so that it's not getting in the way of the guitars and things that actually need a little bit more of this upper mid-range and mid-range in the mix, guitars, vocals, all that kind of stuff. So in that case, as opposed to limiting it really aggressively, I'm using a compressor, and in this case, I'm using kind of an 1176 style compressor. You can just use the stock Logic compressor, and I'm setting it with a 4:1 ratio and a pretty slow attack, which on this style compressor I think is still about a millisecond, and then kind of a medium fast-ish release. So this is going to let that initial bass pluck through, and then it's going to turn it down a little bit, and then it's going to let off fairly quickly. So you can see here, you can watch. Louder notes get turned down a little bit more, quieter notes a little bit less. So it's smoothing them out, but then it's also making them a little bit punchier and a little bit almost grittier. If we listen to this soloed and I turn it off. And then I turn it back on. There's just a little more bite to it. Let's actually listen to it with the rest of the bass. If I turn this off, it's kind of flat, right? Add this on. There's a little bit of an aggression to this sound that just helps it cut through in the mix a little bit. And then because of a little bit of inconsistency, some notes were hitting a little bit too hard relative to others. I'm using a limiter here, but just to catch the biggest peaks. You'll see it's never really doing anything except a couple of these notes. You'll see over here, this is the gain reduction meter. We can see, yeah, it turns down just a couple of those notes just a little bit. So I just set the threshold and the output to the same amount. So it's only basically saying just nothing's going to go past here no matter what. Okay, so that's the bass. And again, pretty massive difference. If I pull up the original DI bass track, just a single bass track, and we listen to that with even the same amp emulator here, this is what that sounds like. It's a good sound, but compared to that's the bass sound that I was going for in this mix. So super proud of that, really happy with how it came out. Well, let's go and talk about the third and final thing. And this is, again, a little bit more advanced, and it's the kind of thing that if you don't have pretty good ears where you've been mixing for a while, you could kind of mess up a mix if you do this. So not for everybody. Again, if you're not getting mixes that you're happy with, focus on kind of those 6 fundamental steps. But if you're getting mixes that you're pretty happy with and you just want to take them to the next level, this is a fun one for me. The idea here is that we're just cheating a little extra stereo width out of our guitars. And we're doing this on our guitar bus. So where all of our guitars run through together in one place, just a little bit of processing here. And in this case, we actually have 3 guitar buses because they're doing different jobs within the mix. We'll look at that in just a second. But what we have here is a stereo compressor that's running in dual mono. So as opposed to reacting to the left and right together where something's loud on the right and it turns both ears down, it's reacting to the left and right kind of independently. So that automatically gives you a little bit more of this perceived width because it's not just moving it and kind of gluing it together. It's actually doing the opposite and letting it move independently. Now, if you wanted to do that with the Logic compressor, you can just select dual mono here and then be sure that you hit couple to make sure that any changes you make on the left ear are carried over to the right ear. But in this case, we're doing it with this Purple Audio, and I really love this plugin because it automatically works in dual mono. It has this really great character. You've already seen it inside this mix. But then it also has this little stereo width knob that uses a really great stereo widening algorithm. And I'm generally very cautious with stereo widening because you can absolutely make a great mix sound bad with stereo widening because it is often a little bit destructive. But you can see here I'm doing very, very slight, maybe 107. So that's like a 7% extra stereo width. But when you add that up with the dual mono nature of this plugin, and it has this cool kind of analog thing where it's different channels, so slightly different saturation between the left and the right ears. Everything about this is just this extra lift in our widening, if you will. So if we solo this and just bypass this plugin, check this out. This is on, turn it off. We lose a little bit of that perceived volume because the compressor is going down a little bit, but we also lose a little bit of this like push it outside of the speakers kind of thing going on with this plugin and how we've set it. Okay, so subtle on its own, but then you take that and you put it across the entire set of guitars that we have here. So for example, I also have these super dirty guitar rhythms. And then I have this lead guitar. You put it across all of these, and if we just bypass all of these in the context of the mix here, on. Wide. A lot smaller, right? Okay, I know that last one is a little bit advanced. If it's a little bit above your head, don't use it just yet. Don't feel like you have to jump out and do this. These are just things that were helping me take this mix from being pretty happy with it to get it to that next level. Sometimes these subtle things really make a big difference. So hopefully this is fun for you. Hopefully this is exciting. If you enjoyed the little snippets of the song you heard, definitely check it out. Broke Royals. The song is called Still. I'm very proud of the band for this new exploration where we're trying out all different things. The guitarist is actually singing on this song. This is kind of his baby, if you will. And so it's a little bit of us pushing our boundaries as a band, but who's to say you can't do that? This is just making music. This is just for fun. So definitely check it out if you like the snippets you heard here. If this was helpful, be sure to let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you in another video real soon.